The gorilla had stopped eating. After 3 weeks, the zoo had no choice. They would have to let him go in 48 hours. But when an old photograph accidentally fell into his enclosure, what the broken silverback did with it changed everything, and proved that some bonds are strong enough to choose life over death. Before you watch, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss another touching story like this one. And write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood outside Boma's enclosure, watching the massive silverback through the observation glass. He sat motionless in the corner, his back to her. His powerful frame hunched in a way that looked almost human in its despair. "How long has it been?" she asked the headkeeper, James. 22 days since he ate anything substantial," James said quietly. 3 weeks since he's responded to any of us. Sarah had been the zoo's chief veterinarian for 15 years, and she'd never seen a case like this. Boma was in his physical prime. Tests showed nothing wrong, but he was dying. "It's psychological," Sarah said quietly. "He's given up." James nodded, his weathered face creased with worry. "I've tried everything. His favorite foods, enrichment toys. He even brought in the other gorillas to try to engage him. Nothing works." Sarah watched Boma for another long moment. His breathing was shallow. His eyes, when she'd examined him yesterday, had been empty. The spark of intelligence and curiosity that made gorillas so remarkable was simply gone. "The board meets tomorrow," she said finally. "They're going to ask for my recommendation." James looked at her sharply. "And what are you going to tell them?" Sarah closed her eyes. "That if there's no improvement in the next 48 hours, we may have to make the decision to humanely let him go. We can't let him suffer like this." "There has to be something we haven't tried," James insisted. "Someone who can reach him." Sarah was about to respond when James's expression changed. "Marcus," he breathed. "We need to call Marcus." Marcus Webb was pruning roses in his backyard when his phone rang. At 65 years old, he'd been retired from the zoo for 5 years, and he'd grown to love the quiet rhythm of his days. Gardening in the morning, reading in the afternoon, occasional visits to his daughter's family. But when he saw Riverside Zoo on the caller ID, his heart jumped. "Marcus, it's James. We need you. It's Boma." Marcus's pruning shears fell into the rosebush. Boma. The name brought back a flood of memories. A tiny, terrified baby gorilla, barely 3 months old, clinging to Marcus's shirt with hands the size of walnuts. The long nights in the nursery, bottle feeding every 3 hours, teaching Boma to climb, to play, to trust. 22 years ago. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, though he already knew from James's tone that it was serious. James explained: the depression, the refusal to eat, the 48-hour deadline. "They're going to have to let him go, Marcus, unless we can reach him somehow. You're the only one he might respond to." Marcus grabbed his jacket. "I'm on my way." 40 minutes later, Marcus stood in front of Boma's enclosure, his heart breaking at what he saw. The vibrant, curious gorilla he'd raised was gone. In his place sat a shell, a massive, powerful body with no life behind the eyes. "Boma," Marcus said softly, pressing his hand against the glass. "Hey, buddy, it's me." No response. Boma didn't even turn his head. Marcus tried for 20 minutes, talking, calling Boma's name, even singing the old lullaby he'd used when Boma was an infant and couldn't sleep. Nothing. Sarah appeared at his elbow. "I'm sorry, Marcus, I was hoping, but he's too far gone." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. He'd known this moment would come someday. Gorillas in captivity live 50 years, and Marcus was only 65. He'd always assumed Boma would outlive him. But not like this. Not with Boma giving up, disappearing into himself while his body was still strong. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and something slipped from his wallet. A photograph. It fluttered down, landing against the glass. Marcus bent to pick it up, and his breath caught. The photo was old and creased. It showed a younger Marcus sitting cross-legged in a nursery, holding a tiny baby gorilla wrapped in a blue blanket. Boma, 22 years ago. Marcus's hand shook as he held it. "That's a beautiful photo," Sarah said quietly behind him. Marcus was about to respond when he froze. Boma's head had turned, just slightly, just enough that one dark eye was now visible, focused not on Marcus, but on the photograph pressed against the glass. "Boma?" Marcus whispered. Nothing happened for a long moment. Boma remained hunched in the corner, but that one eye stayed fixed on the photograph. Then, almost imperceptibly, his breathing, changed. "Wait," James breathed from behind Marcus. "Look at him. Something's different." Sarah stepped closer to the glass, her medical training making her notice what others might miss. "His respiratory rate is increasing. He's becoming more alert." For the first time in 3 weeks, Boma moved. It wasn't fast. His movements were slow, almost painful, like a machine that hadn't run in years and was struggling to start again. But he moved. His massive frame began to unfold. One hand pressed against the concrete floor, bearing his weight, then the other. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "He's standing." Boma rose to his full height, 400 pounds of muscle and power that had been motionless for so long the staff had begun to wonder if he'd forgotten how to move. He took one step toward the glass. James grabbed Marcus's arm. "Marcus, I've never seen him respond to anything in 3 weeks. Not food, not other gorillas, not me. But that photograph, he sees it," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "He actually sees it." Boma took another step, then another. His eyes never left the photograph. The distance between them was only 15 feet, but watching Boma cross it felt like witnessing something impossible. A resurrection. A return from somewhere dark and unreachable. When he finally stopped directly in front of the glass, Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "In 15 years as a veterinarian," she said quietly, "I've never seen anything like this." Marcus held the photograph up higher, pressing it flat against the glass so Boma could see it clearly. Boma's hand came up slowly, trembling slightly. Whether from weakness or emotion, Marcus couldn't tell. His palm touched the glass exactly where the baby gorilla in the photo sat. His fingers were spread wide, as if trying to touch the image through the barrier. Then his hand moved, sliding across the glass to where young Marcus sat in the photograph. He touched that spot, too, his movements deliberate, careful. "He's identifying the subjects," Sarah breathed. "He knows who's in that photo." And this was what made Marcus's vision blur with tears. Boma's other hand came up and touched his own chest. Once, deliberately, unmistakably. "That's me. That baby is me." "Dear God," James whispered. He recognizes himself. After 22 years, he recognizes himself. Boma's hand returned to the glass, pressing against the image of baby Boma with a gentleness that seemed impossible from such a massive creature. His shoulders, which had been hunched in despair for weeks, straightened slightly. His head, which had hung low, lifted. And his eyes, those eyes that had been empty and hollow for so long, suddenly held something that made every person in the observation room catch their breath. Awareness, recognition, hope. Then he made a sound, not a roar or a grunt, but a soft questioning vocalization, high-pitched, almost fragile. The sound infant gorillas make when they want to be held. A sound Marcus hadn't heard from Boma in 20 years. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. That vocalization, adult males don't make that sound. They haven't made it since infancy. "He just did," James said, his voice filled with wonder. "He's calling for Marcus. like he did when he was a baby. "Oh, buddy," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm right here." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't enough. The glass was still between them. Marcus was still on the outside, still separated, still, in Boma's understanding, gone. Marcus turned to Sarah. "Let me in." "What?" "Let me into the enclosure, please." Sarah shook her head immediately. "Marcus, no. You know I can't do that. He's 400 pounds. You're 65 years old. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," Marcus interrupted. "Look at him. Really, look at him." They all turned to watch Boma, who still stood at the glass, still touching the photo, still making that soft infant sound. "He's not aggressive," Marcus continued. "He's not territorial. He's heartbroken, and I think—" Marcus's voice caught. "I think he believes I abandoned him." "Marcus," James started. "I retired 5 years ago," Marcus said. "I left and never came back. From his perspective, I just disappeared. The person who raised him, who was there every day for the first 3 years of his life, just vanished." Sarah's expression shifted as understanding dawned. "The depression started 6 months ago," she said slowly, "right around the 5-year anniversary of your retirement." Marcus nodded. "He waited for me. For 5 years he waited for me to come back. And when I didn't, he gave up." The observation room was silent except for the soft sound of Boma's vocalizations. "If I don't go in there," Marcus said quietly, "if I don't show him that I haven't abandoned him, you're going to have to let him go in 48 hours. I can't live with that. I won't." Sarah and James exchanged a long look. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I can give you 10 minutes. If there's any sign of aggression, any sign at all, we intervene immediately. Understood?" "Understood." 5 minutes later, Marcus stood inside Boma's enclosure for the first time in 22 years. The space smelled of hay and earth and gorilla, a scent so familiar it made Marcus's chest ache with memory. Boma stood 30 feet away, watching Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read. Marcus held up the photograph. "I brought this back," he said quietly. "I should have brought it sooner, should have come back sooner." He took a slow step forward. "I'm sorry, Boma. I'm so sorry I left." Another step. Boma didn't move, but his eyes never left the photograph. Marcus kept walking, slow and steady, until he was close enough to reach out and touch Boma. But he didn't. Instead, he sat down, cross-legged on the ground, the same position he'd been in the photograph. And he held out the photo to Boma. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with heartbreaking gentleness, Boma reached out and took the photograph from Marcus's hand. He held it carefully, studying it, his enormous fingers somehow managing not to crush the delicate paper. And then Boma did something that made Marcus cry. He sat down too, cross-legged, exactly like the position in the photograph. And he placed the photo between them, positioned so they could both see it. Then Boma's hand moved toward Marcus, not aggressive, not grabbing, just reaching. His fingers touched Marcus's shoulder, then his face, then his hair, grooming him, the way Marcus had groomed baby Boma 22 years ago. Role reversal, comfort given back. "Yeah," Marcus whispered, crying openly now. "I'm here. I'm not leaving again." Outside the enclosure, Sarah called the zoo director. "We're not letting Boma go," she said. "Marcus is staying, daily, for as long as it takes." Marcus said yes without hesitation. That night, he moved a cot into the observation room. When he woke at 2 a.m., Boma had built his nest against the glass wall, the photograph tucked carefully beside him. Marcus pressed his hand to the glass. Boma mirrored the gesture. They slept like that until morning. The next day, Marcus ate breakfast in front of the glass. After watching for 30 minutes, Boma picked up a piece of fruit and ate it, the first food in 23 days. By day 3, Boma was eating regularly, timing his meals to match Marcus's. On day 7, a thunderstorm hit. Boma panicked, terrified of thunder from old trauma. Marcus began to sing, the same lullaby he'd sung to baby Boma during storms 20 years ago. Boma stopped pacing. He approached the glass, listening. By the time Marcus finished, Boma was calm, settled, remembering. 3 weeks later, Marcus made it official. He delayed his retirement plans and became a volunteer at the zoo, visiting Boma 3 hours every day. 6 months later, he was helping other depressed gorillas using the same method: presence, patience, photographs. But every day, without fail, Boma greeted Marcus the same way, by showing him the photograph, their photograph. 22 years old now, laminated to preserve it, worn at the edges from being handled carefully by massive gorilla hands. Proof that some bonds don't break, even when tested by time, distance, and despair. Because love isn't just about never leaving. Sometimes it's about coming back. After seeing how one photograph brought Boma back from the edge of death, do you believe animals can suffer from broken hearts just like humans do? Yes or no? Let us know in the comments below. If you like the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.